Shabbat Shalom. I began reading the Torah again as an adult when I was in England on a study abroad program. I didn't have anything like the internet yet. It had not been invented, or at least not within my reach. I had lots of books to read, but I felt since I was there and since I was going to be traveling to Israel during my spring break, maybe I should actually, read this Bible thing. I'd been, trying to live a more Jewish life, but it had been a while since I had tried to read cover to cover the Tanakh. So there I am, 20-year-old me. Genesis is fascinating, interesting, stimulating. I get to the book of Shemot, the book of Exodus, which we begin with this week's Torah portion, and I begin scratching my head. Because when you read the story in its details, when you don't just get the Charlton Heston version, there are some things that seem a little unusual. I'm not going to go into the whole hardening of Pharaoh's heart. I'm not going to go into the timeline of the plagues lasting for a very long time, it not being 1, 2, 3, get out of free. But tonight in particular, there was one problem that really stood out to me, and that was God and Moses, by extensions, dishonesty. When Moses goes to Pharaoh, when he first approaches this leader of Egypt, what does he ask for? To go out into the wilderness for 3 days. That's it. 3 days. Moses does not approach Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." He says, "Let my people have a 3-day holiday." Well, 6 days if you count there and back again for travel time. Maybe a full week if you're going to spend 1 full day doing whatever service the Hebrews were going to do. But that's it. That's all Moses asked for. And apparently that's all God asked Moses to ask for. Now, we focus, of course, on the fact that Pharaoh wouldn't grant even this. That Pharaoh would not grant that 1 week opportunity for 3 days out, 3 days back, 1 day celebration, that he dragged his feet over and over on all the different stops. But when we look through the rest of the plagues, when God, through Moses, is negotiating with Pharaoh, Pharaoh continually works off the assumption that that initial offer was made in good faith. He says, all right, I give. You can go, but your family stay behind. And they say, nope, we got to all go. All right, I give. You can go, but your flocks and herds stay behind. No, we can't do that. Oh, and so on and so forth. Never does Moses say, actually I said that we were going to go and come back, but we're not coming back. All right, we got you over a barrel here because, God's on our side. We're going to leave, and there's nothing you can do about it. At no point does Moses make that clear. It seems entirely disingenuous. And in fact, right up to the point where Pharaoh is chasing after us and up to the sea, it seems like he is running because in his mind we broke the bargain. That we said we were only going for 3 days, but now it becomes apparent to him that we're not coming back after 3 days, and so he begins to pursue. And that is that was a little bit much for my 20-year-old something to take. Of how could God just bald-face lie to Pharaoh like this? Surely God knew that he did not want us to just leave and come back. Surely God knew that the ultimate goal was for us to leave Egypt completely. Yes and no, says my slightly older than 20-year-old self, as a 49-year-old. I have read additional commentary, studied, and thought about this very deeply, and I recognize that God actually did make that first offer in good faith. That was God's first offer, and God would have been content had Pharaoh taken him up on that. Now, yes, it's not exactly fair, because God, being God, knows what Pharaoh will or won't do, and God certainly knew that Pharaoh was not going to agree to the 3-day holiday stint. But that doesn't mean that Pharaoh wasn't given the legitimate choice to take that offer. Yes, his own constitution, psychology, and blinded obstinacy would prevent him from doing so. But had he been a different person, had he been of different temperament, had he taken that offer and said, you know what, I'm going to be magnanimous. Fine, take your week off, go off, worship your God, I'll see you guys all back here next week. Had Pharaoh had the personal ability to say that, and the people took that week off, God would have allowed us to return to Egypt. And this realization came to me because I recognized, thanks to the brilliant insights of our sages, that the Exodus wasn't about our exiting. I know that's what the English word means. But our Exodus was not about leaving Egypt. Our Exodus was not about an end to slavery. Those were secondary aspects and eventually essential elements. But the Exodus was not about that. That wasn't what God was looking for first, foremost, and in its totality. What God was looking for was a nation to receive Torah. And had we been allowed to go out 3 days, go to Mount Sinai, be given Torah, and come back 3 days and stay in Egypt with Torah, that would have been okay. Not ideal, but we know much of the last 3,000 years since has not been ideal. But we would have had Torah. The Torah would have entered into our nation. It would have entered into the world to begin to bring its light. And that was ultimately the purpose of everything that happens from this point forward throughout the rest of Tanakh, was to have that moment, that portal in the world to open and allow the Torah to enter. And had that been given, Dayenu, it would have been enough. It would have been enough. And had the opposite occurred, meaning had we been allowed to go free, to no longer be slaves, but to stay in Egypt as free people, as equal citizens of Egypt, but to be bereft of Torah, to not have received the Torah, for the Torah never to have entered the world, that would have been a catastrophe. That would have been more horrific. Because where there is Torah, there is light, and there is hope, and there is wisdom, and there is growth towards what is right and good. And where there is no Torah, where the Torah cannot penetrate, then no matter how free you may feel, you live in darkness. And no matter how wonderful your life may seem, it is not as wonderful as it is meant to be, because you cannot be guided towards the truths the Torah wished to share. That offer that God made was legitimate to Pharaoh. It was made in good faith. Pharaoh could not accept it. But we also get a choice. Will we recognize that God reaching out to us as a nation and as individuals is not just about giving us our freedom. It's not just about striking the chains from our wrists, but was about giving us this gift of Torah. That our hands were freed so that we could accept Torah. And that if we choose not to accept Torah, then of what worth is our freedom? Of what worth is our existence? Our life, our freedom is there in order to be a ground for Torah to grow within. And if we turn our back on that, if we say thank you for the freedom, but no thank you for the Torah, then we allow ourselves to remain enslaved to something which has no Pharaoh, something which has no form, no shape, no body, but has us imprisoned nonetheless. So as we celebrate and continue to read through this story of Exodus, make sure that you are not only learning the message of freedom, because it was not about freedom from slavery. It was about freedom to embrace the Torah. And that must always remain at the forefront of our goal and of our life. Shabbat Shalom.